Thank you very much. It's always strange when you hear your kind of bio being read out. It sounded, vaguely impressive, which is quite nice. So yes, thank you for inviting me. It's a real honour to be asked to do this. I think it's the first time I've ever been an after-dinner speaker, so I will do my best to keep you all engaged, particularly after we've eaten a lot of chicken. So I hope to not send you to sleep at any point. I should say as well, I do talk about other things other than women. I know my bio sounds like I only talk about violence against women and girls, and I do talk about it a lot because I think it is an important subject that has not always had the due care and attention that it deserves. And I am going to talk about it again tonight, but just to reassure you, I do talk about other things as well. So I was going to start, before I get into the kind of main gist of my speech, with just a little reminder about what the Police and Crime Commissioner role is. I think for a lot of people it's still a bit of a new role, people don't quite know, who I am and what I do. So just very briefly, I have a police and crime plan, which are my priorities that I believe, as identified by the public, who I represent, have just been elaborated on. I hold the Chief Constable to account for that plan, so I will look to see whether the Chief and Merseyside Police are delivering on what I believe are the priorities for residents in Merseyside. I have responsibility for the budget, so all the money that comes through from the Home Office, but also that comes through council tax, comes to me, and then I'm responsible for giving that to Chief Constable and monitoring how that is being spent. I have a specific role in crime prevention. I'm very focused on how we can actually prevent crime from happening in the first place. So, for example, I give money to the Violence Reduction Partnership, who I'm going to mention later on, but they do incredible work to look at how we can stop crime from ever becoming a reality. And I also invest in a youth diversion fund, looking particularly at how we can support young people, perhaps during Halloween and bonfire night, to try and remove the temptation to get involved in things like antisocial behaviour. I have a specific role in victim services, so I'm very passionate about victims of crime and doing more to support them. I have a specific role in terms of commissioning services to provide that support, so we have lots of brilliant independent organisations who will provide support for victims to help them recover from the trauma of what they might have experienced. And then finally, I also chair the Merseyside Criminal Justice Board. And again, this is relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. I don't have the same powers around the budget and the oversight that I do with policing, but actually as PCCs, we are very much involved in the wider criminal justice system. And we always refer to it as a system when actually I think we know, and for those of us who are involved in the criminal justice system, there's lots of different organisations and it doesn't always quite work as smoothly as perhaps we'd like it to. So I'm very involved in that process as well and working with other criminal justice agencies to make it better. You've already heard as well, I have a number of national roles, including the lead for custody, but also the deputy lead for criminal justice. And in particular, one of these areas of focus is around women in the criminal justice system. So as well as it being a priority within my police and crime plan for here on Merseyside, I'm also very passionate about looking at what we can do nationally to tackle some of these issues. So my focus on this is around ensuring that we focus on better outcomes for women, particularly those who commit non-violent offences, through community interventions and trying to divert them away from custody. So my original idea on what's called the lecture tonight was why we should stop talking about female offenders. However, there were some concerns raised that might, taken out of context, give the wrong message. Because, of course, we shouldn't stop talking about female offenders. It is absolutely vital that we continue to talk about them and, in particular, talk about the issues that they are facing. They are a group who, I believe, continue to be let down by our criminal justice system in many ways. And, as I had originally hoped to emphasise with my lecture, it is exactly because we think of them as female offenders instead of women. Women who very often have been the victim of far greater crimes than the one they have committed, and that they don't often get the support they deserve. They are women who are mothers, as we've discussed this afternoon. They will have families, they will be sisters. They have so much more going on than what I think we label them as when we simply call them female offenders. So I believe that the criminal justice system has long been unresponsive to the specific needs of women, the lack of understanding of the complexities and the vulnerabilities that women will experience that can often lead them to offend. And these are women who have gotten caught up in a cycle of offending because we have failed to treat them as vulnerable women who actually need our support and not our punishment. And not only do we fail to understand the cause of their offending and provide them for that support when they need it most, we actually end up punishing them for it. And in lots of cases, we treat them more harshly than we do male offenders. And so women are suffering twice over as a result of our services failing. So we talked earlier about the importance of not focusing too much on stats, but if you'll permit me, I am going to highlight just a couple. So nationally, 63% of prison sentences started by women in 2021 were for less than 12 months, and this compared to 48% of men. Here on Merseyside, only 24% of violent offences are committed by women, and yet 77% of women are serving short custodial sentences of 12 months or less. And actually in Merseyside, this is higher than the national picture. We know that women commit less serious offences than men. In 2022, women sentenced for theft, non-motoring offences and miscellaneous crimes against society, which is things like not paying a TV licence and council tax, things like that. That accounted for over half of all women given custodial sentences of less than 12 months. So that was 57% for women compared to 46% of men. So we know that we are giving women discordant sentences for lower types of crimes. And what we also know is that actually sending women into custody actually causes more harm. And we know that the outcomes for women in custody are worse than they are for men. The self-harm rates are 6 times higher than they are for men. Women are twice as likely than men to have suicidal ideations whilst in custody. And critically, women are 69 times more likely to die in the week following prison release than men. 69 times more likely, which is a truly shocking statistic. But sadly, I think for lots of you in the room, this won't be new information. We had a brilliant discussion this afternoon where we highlighted some of these issues very clearly. Lots of you will already be very acutely aware of the challenges that we face for women in the criminal justice system. The Corston report, as we'll be very familiar with, laid out that report very clearly, and in particular highlighting the vulnerabilities of women before they enter the criminal justice system. Women are different to men, and the criminal justice system should and must treat them as such. The criminal justice system needs to be more responsive to the complexities of women's cases, their vulnerabilities, the disadvantages, and also the traumas that they have faced. We know, for example, that 60% of women who are entering the criminal justice system report experiencing domestic abuse. They are significantly more likely to present with alcohol and drug-related needs. Women report as being depressed on entry to prison 55% compared to 37% of men. And we know that 25% of women report having issues with drugs or alcohol on entry to prison compared to 13% of men. So we know there are lots of underlying issues that women are going into custody with, and that's because we're not tackling those issues in the first place. So, what I've been asked to talk about today, what are we doing about it? Well, the government launched their female offender strategy back in 2018. It had 3 strategic priorities: fewer women in custody, and especially on short-term sentences, better conditions in custody, and having more women managed in the community. These are all laudable aims, all things I think all of us here would absolutely support. But how much commitment to delivering them is really there? We know the benefits of community sentences in specialist environments are key. They provide women's only safe spaces. We provide holistic and integrated approaches, and we heard again some of the brilliant work of Adelaide House earlier, providing exactly that. And they are proportionate sentences to the crimes that have been done. And it was absolutely right that we included in that strategy to get more women into community. However, the government at the same time proposed plans to build 500 new prison places for women. They say it was because they wanted to replace the tired estate and improve the quality of accommodation for those in prison. Not, again, and it's something that I think lots of people who've been to women's prisons would welcome. But at the same time, they have no plans to decommission the old prisons, which suggests that they are very comfortable with the idea of sending more women into prison, completely going against what they've outlined in their strategy. In addition, they have actually failed to put that sufficient investment into actually tackling the reasons for women's offending. And it isn't just me that's saying this. The National Audit Office made it clear that while the strategy is intended to improve outcomes for women, a lack of clear goals makes it hard to evaluate progress. And in their words, such as where it focused attention, such as developing community options for women, in their words, delivery has been disappointing. Furthermore, the Justice Select Committee has found that there is yet to be any clear evidence that women are being diverted away from jail, despite promises to develop other methods of punishment and rehabilitation. There has been insufficient investment in the strategy, and this is key to the lack of progress. But so too is the issue of silo working. To see women as women and not just focus on them as offenders, we have to avoid seeing them purely as offenders, and we miss too many opportunities to help them and deter them away from future criminality. We need a whole systems approach. So nationally, this means that when the government is developing its drug strategy, or maybe their mental health strategy, there needs to be a really big focus on the specific needs of women within those strategies, and that any funding associated with those strategies comes with provisions for women-centred pathways. We cannot keep putting women into the same process as men and expect to get the same results, because women are different. So what role can I play as Police and Crime Commissioner? There's no doubt that policing and criminal justice agencies have a very key role to play in making sure that we identify vulnerability as early as possible and put the right interventions in place. Working with the National Police Chiefs Council, I'm working on a toolkit for PCCs and policing leads to think about what pathways are needed and what police forces should be doing to better support women. Here on Merseyside, there is already a clear focus on diversion. Diversion is at the front end of the process through our use of out-of-court disposals on Merseyside, delivered by our specialist women's services, which has benefits for the whole criminal justice system as well as for the women themselves. This is about providing meaningful diversion for low-level or first-time offenders as a prime opportunity for early intervention and ultimately providing the right support for that woman. Through the Merseyside Criminal Justice Board, which I mentioned earlier, we identified gaps in the use of pre-sentence reports, which again we heard discussed in the conversation this afternoon. So what we've done as a result is courts on Merseyside no longer sentence without a pre-sentence report in cases where a custodial sentence is a possibility. Now, of course, this is crucial because it enables judges and magistrates to understand the wider context to the offence, to offer a proportionate and appropriate sentence. So that might include recognising that the woman might have been driven by abusive behaviour, or it might be because they were being driven by substance misuse, or it might be, as we discussed earlier, because she has children, and actually taking her away and putting her in prison would actually have a disproportionate impact on her family. I have also recently urged the Ministry of Justice to support a specific court on Wirral for women who have offended to meet national best practice models. We know there is lots of really good evidence where you have a women-centred approach, in courts included, where you can get really good outcomes for the women who are there. In custody, once women do go into custody, we have a huge range of support in place as well. We've already heard again about the brilliant child impact assessments that we do, working closely with our Violence Reduction Partnership. The Violence Reduction Partnership also funds partners of prisoners who are providing practical support to young women in custody on resettlement back into the community. And importantly, they provide that practical and emotional support for the whole family so they understand the process, and to provide that security for the young woman leaving prison to allow them to reduce their reoffending in future. We know that there is a very strong link between the work that we do with the family and the support that an individual might have from their family in reducing that the likelihood for them to reoffend. So again, it's not just about providing that woman with the support she needs, it will actually stop her offending again if that family support is in place around her. We have invested in the Department of Working Pensions pilot, linking women in prison on release with a job coach to ensure that there is some financial security when resettlement takes place. And again, we know that poverty is a huge driver for women's offending as well. So looking at how we can empower women to have the skills they need to earn a living would absolutely reduce their chances of reoffending. And again, as we've already heard today, this is the problem you see of going second, is that all the brilliant stuff has been heard this afternoon. Adelaide House talked about the fantastic welcome packs that they provide and for women who are released from custody with some essential items and clothes to ensure some level of comfort and care for women leaving prison at a time when we know they're going to be most vulnerable. I mentioned about policing and the role of policing, and I'm really proud that here on Merseyside the Chief Constable takes a preventative approach. So we are one of the first police forces in the country to launch a completely new approach around prevention. And this is about saying to our police officers and staff, when they're out and about and responding to an incident, don't just focus on that incident. Look at what is happening around them. You're seeing the same people coming through. Why are you seeing the same woman coming through the criminal justice system? Maybe there's something else going on. Who should you be referring her to actually stop this cycle of offending? Or maybe you go to arrest a woman and there are children in the house. What are you doing about those children? How do you feed that back? How do you make sure those children are taken care of? Those are some of the messages that the Chief and her leadership team are passing on to policing here on Merseyside. With our community sentences, we are very lucky that we have some fantastic local grassroots organisations as well, including PSS and Tomorrow's Women. They have an integrated approach, working closely with probation, and this is all about looking at the woman as a whole. Women will be given community orders who will receive support to address what we know to be those critical underlying issues that may have led to the offence itself and may lead to reoffending in the future. Importantly, this is underpinned by a needs-led approach to address issues that we know most frequently arise for women in the criminal justice system, including domestic abuse, accommodation, employment and education, finance, substance misuse and mental health. The Deputy Director for Women at the MOJ recently visited Tomorrow's Women and rated their service as gold standard for their holistic approach and the comprehensive offer to women in and on the periphery of the criminal justice system. And it's not just me saying that. Some of the feedback that we've had from the women who have attended say, I cannot thank Women's Turnaround enough for being such a positive experience, and being referred to the service was the one good thing that came out of my offence. Another woman said, I would not have been able to get clean if it wasn't for Tomorrow's Women. Since receiving this community resolution, I have been able to achieve new things and have hope for the future for the first time in a while. I've been lucky enough to visit Tomorrow's Women's Wirral and on several occasions to see firsthand the crucial work that they do and speak to some of the women whose lives have been transformed and even saved. And listening to those stories from women who've been able to break free of abusive, unhealthy relationships, those who have managed to overcome addiction, and those who have been able to turn their lives around due to the support of this fantastic charity is truly awe-inspiring. It is no coincidence that some women who have been supported by Tomorrow's Women go on to work for them. It is a charity which leaves a lasting impression. I was also fortunate to meet with one of the women who is being supported by PSS and hear about the incredible journey and progress that she made with her substance misuse and also recovering from her trauma of an abusive relationship. All of this demonstrates the huge value of our community services and how vital they are if we're really going to tackle the issue of female offending. But one thing that stuck with me when I spoke to this young woman was that she had expressed that she had spoken to the police and a number of other agencies numerous times about the abuse that she had been suffering. And it was only at the point that she became an offender that we were able to finally give her the support that she should have been offered 6-7 phone calls previously. So while diversion is incredibly important and we absolutely have to make every effort to divert women away at whatever point they become identified, we absolutely have to do enough to support them so we can transform and change their lives. We need to do it sooner and we need to do it better before they even become on the edge of the criminal justice system. As you heard in my introduction, one of my priorities is around tackling violence against women and girls. It is very clear that domestic abuse, and in particular coercive control, is a key factor in women offending. And we heard earlier 60% of women in prisons have suffered domestic abuse. There is no doubt it's a huge factor in offending behaviour, and yet we know it is still not sufficiently being recognised or taken into account in the way that it needs to be, both in the response being offered to women, but also in the sentencing process. It is still not being acknowledged when women are being forced into offending because of the abuse that they are experiencing at home. And this has got to change. My Violence Against Women and Girls strategy is aimed at improving the support to women suffering domestic abuse, ensuring that no woman has to feel trapped and suffer trauma that might lead them into a life of crime. Now, at the heart of all of this work is obviously our partnership working. Locally, we have re-established the Women's Services Alliance, and I'm glad that Carla's in the room today, who is taking that up, so thank you, Carla. And I know they had an extremely successful meeting last week with partners from across the criminal justice service agencies and our support services to identify what the current challenges are and look to set key priorities for the next 12 months. Crucially, this is going to involve working in partnership, developing that whole systems approach across Merseyside, and in particular looking at a gender-specific approach. Where do we need a women-centred focus to try and make the system work? As chair of the Merseyside Criminal Justice Board, we also identified a gap in the governance and the oversight of this work. And so as a result, I've launched the Strategic Policing and Partnerships Board, which brings senior leaders from all organisations which have a role to play in policing and the community together. So it can't just be about policing and criminal justice. We have to involve every single public service in this conversation. And this focuses on addressing existing issues and driving improvements in the way that crime is tackled and, importantly, prevented, how we support victims and witnesses, and how the criminal justice system operates. Now, of course, the key to all of this work is the need for long-term and sustainable investment. As PCC, this is something I have continually lobbied for at a national level and will continue to lobby for, to be a strong voice for funding to support the programmes of work that I have spoken about. When we talk about addressing those underlying causes of offending, whether it's domestic abuse, whether it's mental health, whether it's substance misuse, we cannot do these things cheaply, and we have to recognise that there are no quick fixes or cheap options for this. We have to invest. Women are worth investing in, and if we do it and we do it well, then we will save lots of money because they will never be in the criminal justice system in the first place. But we need that vital funding up front. So I will be the first person to tell you that we still have a long way to go here on Merseyside. There are still some significant challenges on the horizon, not least the cost of living crisis. We know how much poverty plays a role in increasing that vulnerability. Coupled with the ongoing austerity cuts to all of our public services, it is more essential now that we truly work in partnership and use all of our pennies to try and support and protect women. So the Corston report declared it is timely to bring about a radical change in the way we treat women throughout the whole of the criminal justice system. And this must include not just those who offend, but also those at risk of offending. This will require a radical new approach, treating women both holistically and individually, a woman-centred approach. Those words, sadly, are as relevant now as they were 15 years ago. Many women who have wound up in the criminal justice system have needs far more complex than the term female offenders would imply. The criminal justice system must be at the heart of reform, putting the specific needs of women at the forefront of its work to reduce female offending. But it goes beyond the criminal justice system. It is our local authorities, our third sector, our health services, and all of our public services. We must all do better for women. This is how we break the cycle of female offending. I'm committed to ensuring that I do all in my power to hold agencies to account and ensure a joined-up approach, so that the idea of treating women as a whole, and not simply as offenders, is not such a radical one. Thank you.